After a long time waiting, Worlds is finally here. After months and months of play, some ridiculously good matches, some matches we'd all rather just forget, we are finally at the apex, the crescendo, the highlight. But let's say you've not been religiously keeping up with the league this season. Let's say you're new to Smite esports entirely. After all of these months of play, who is the team to beat? Who are the team you want to see in your bracket? Who's not got a hope? And who could take it all? So I'll be breaking down the teams in the order they finish in the table, as I think... Oh, fuck. I'm going to be breaking down the teams in the order that they finish in the table, as I think that gives the best general sense of how strong each team was, but trust me when I say that doesn't tell even nearly half the story for a lot of these teams. At the time of recording, only 2 teams have officially qualified, which is Ghost and Radiance. The rest of the teams will be fighting it out to qualify in the placements, which start on the 5th of January, with Worlds starting on the 8th. Worlds officially starts on the 8th, and the elephant in the room is that, unfortunately, it will be taking place online because of COVID. Absolute pisser of the highest degree, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be amazing. Renegades versus Sanguine in the playoffs were online, and what a set that was. Good stuff is still awaiting us, so let's get into it. And that means that I'm starting with Ghost. Now let's not fuck around here. Ghost are the best team in the league. If there were any doubts as to whether they were the favourites before the playoffs, those doubts have been answered, and then some. The regular season was a pretty close fought affair with Spacestation gaming for the top spot, going back and forth, and to be honest, I think Spacestation had the edge for most of the season. But then playoffs came around, and they decided to show everyone that they were still the top team to beat. 6 games, 6 wins, job done, first place secured. Their status as favourites solidified. And this just complements the fact that they won the previous MSI a few months ago, the mid-season invitational. 2 tournaments, 2 wins for Ghost, and this time they just demolished the rest of the league. It's a bit of a grim omen. And what was particularly scary for the rest of the league was the way that they won. This is a team who have been a bit kind of memed on for this season for having a really strong early game, but tend to throw late games, have a few slip-ups here and there. They took all of these games late and just blew teams out of the water. For a team to have that many different facets to their game, somewhat concerning if you're anyone but Ghost. In terms of players to watch, it all starts with their captain and the heart and soul of the team, Polar Bear Mike. Mike has been, in my opinion, the best player in the league this season. He is the pace setter for this team. He is everywhere. I don't think there is another player in the league who single-handedly brings as much pressure as Mike does. He acts as the initiation for the team, as well as the peel. He does everything from start to finish in that team comp. Every single member of Ghost is top tier and capable of winning games by themselves. It's Mike's job to give them the space to do that, and he does it with aplomb. Wherever Mike goes, the team follows. If you want to watch what this team does and where they get their advantages, watch Mike and the rest funnels through him. In terms of picks, keep an eye out for the signature Hercules pick. For someone to be rivaling a Raw's Hercules is something, but I think Polar Bear Mike has gone above and beyond that this season. It's pretty ridiculous, frankly, and it would not surprise you to see it banned fairly consistently throughout the tournament. The other player to watch on their team is their jungler, Sam for Soccer. The current defending Worlds MVP, Sam has gone from good to potentially the best jungler in the league this season. In terms of mechanics, he seems head and shoulders above the rest of the league. I mean, the stats don't lie. There's a reason why he's got more kills than just about anyone else in the league this year. He is just murdering the league week in, week out. Sam's typical playstyle is full damage assassins looking to one-shot the carries, which is why it was interesting at MSI to see that he picked up gods like Odin as well, something I would never have put him on. But I mean, they won every single game and it wasn't even close, so to see they have this other facet to their game is also scary. Although dominant, this team is by no means invincible. Like I said earlier, they have a habit of throwing games here and there with a bit of sloppy play, potentially getting a bit too confident in their ability to end. And we've seen times where they've just been blown out of the water, like when they played PK towards the end of the season and lost in a pretty convincing 2-0. This team is not unbeatable, but make no odds about it. This is the best team in the league and this is the team to beat. But the real question remains, can the rival curse be broken? They might be called Ghosts, but this is still Team Rival. Can they break the curse? The second team was Spacestation Gaming. If I was writing this piece a few months ago, I would have been painting a much rosier picture for the boys. This team is the same core as the dominant Renegades team from last season. That is Irafa, Dardes, Cherio and Nika. For the majority of the season, they looked head and shoulders above the rest of the league. Apart from one very notable exception, which I'll get to later. Vote had slotted straight in where Funballer had left. Cherio had shown week in, week out why he's held in such high regard among the junglers in the league. And for some reason, Nika kept getting Amaterasu. Stop it. Don't let it happen. God, don't let that happen. They were going from strength to strength, so why am I sounding so negative? Well, the worry for Spacestation is whether they've peaked too early, whether they've been found out. A few weeks ago, this team seemed destined to get the top spot, but a few dropped sets at the end of the year, followed by a pretty comprehensive defeat by Radiance in the playoffs, meant that they finished the season a bit shakier than they would have liked. So, where did it go wrong for them? Well, I think a lot of it comes down to their picks. Put it this way, I can't imagine we'll see teams banning anything against them other than precisely Erlang, Hera, and Aphrodite. Those three gods on that squad are just unbeatable as far as I can tell. This is a team who, with the right draft, look like world beaters, look like the best in the world. Without those picks, they don't look like quite the same force. The heart of this team is Cheerio. Whereas I said with Ghost that everything flows through Mike, instead it's with the jungler on Spacestation. Cheerio is at the heart of everywhere this team goes. When he's able to impact the game, Spacestation look unstoppable. When he's not able to impact the game, they look much, much less impressive. This is where the Erlang Shen pick comes into play. Erlang seems to provide the perfect level of early game pressure, late game carry potential, and just all around Cheerio-ness that makes it work for this team, that makes this team tick. But in recent weeks we've seen this banned, and I just don't think the picks outside of Erlang seem nearly as impressive for Cheerio. We've seen Spacestation experiment with gods like Amaterasu jungle, Kali jungle, even an Onher at one point. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not as if they're suddenly bronzies without these picks, but it just doesn't seem like they act in the same cohesive way without them. This is a team who seem to have a perfect understanding between them, and once the picks fall away, it just doesn't seem to quite be there. The worry for Spacestation will be whether they can ensure that Cheerio is still the dominant jungler that we know he can be when he's being forced off of his comfort Erlang pick. It's not as if Cheerio isn't a good player without it. Cheerio is still a wonderful player, but his Erlang play just seems a level above the rest. And so Spacestation will be hoping that they can find another good pick for him, given that it seems almost guaranteed that an Erlang ban will be coming every game. The other bans I spoke of were the attempts of the league to stop the one-man wrecking crew that is Dardes. It's insane to think that Dardes was playing support up until Season 5, because he's one of the best mid laners I have ever seen. Dardes has an ability to make certain gods look like the best gods in the game and look like kind of doo-doo whenever anyone else plays them, and I'm speaking particularly about Hera and Aphrodite. It was a bit of a meme throughout the season to ban out Dardes, because Dardes seems to have just a limitless god pool. We saw him play pretty much every mage you can think of, and he also loves hunter mids. You see him play things like On Her last season, but now it's things like Jingwei and AMC, all sorts of stuff. It seemed like it was impossible to ban him out. But on the other hand, it seems that banning Aphrodite and Hera are banning the two gods that he really, really runs the game with. Every few weeks you'd see a new team try and think, oh, you know, maybe it's not that bad to let Aphro through, maybe we can let Hera through, and they all learned the exact same way that no, it's not okay, you can't do it, stop trying, Aphrodite will doo-doo on you. I don't know how he does it because it looks crap in the hands of anyone else, but on Dardes, different story. Without them, he's still a very competent player, but they don't have quite the same air of fear that they had with those picks. This is a wonderful team, but they do have one glaring issue with them, and that is Ghost Gaming. SSG destroyed the rest of the league this season very comfortably, but for some reason, Ghost just seem to have their number. Ghost and SSG have very clashing styles. Early game pressure versus late game team fights, very similar to the old Rival versus Eunited games back in Season 4, that sort of style. Except the issue is that for some reason, whereas SSG can hold out against the pressure from every other team in the league, for some reason against Ghost, they just crumble. And if it was some, 8th seed team that's not going to qualify for Worlds, that's their bogey team, that's one thing. But when it's the favourite to win the whole thing, the qualified first seed, that's a problem, because if you are planning to win this, you have to be thinking in your head that, we're going to have to go through Ghost at some point. I can't see a world in which the winning team does not have to beat Ghost at some point. So for that to be your bogey team is a bit scary for someone like Rafa trying to win his 3rd world champion. Shit. Missed that bit. As you may have guessed, the players to watch for this team are Dardes and Cheerio. They are at the heart of all things good in this team. That's not to put down the rest of the team. The rest of the team are amazing, but the way that they play just focuses through those two players mainly. And I think this is reflected in especially how Rafa plays. His aggressive support days are over. The man is now a peel machine, keeping his backline alive while Nika just does his thing in their backline, soloing everyone, 1v5. Getting a quad. Don't give Nika Amaterasu, just don't do it. He doesn't want to play it. Just don't let it happen. Don't let the woes of this mislead you though. It's not as if this is some team in a crisis. What are they going to do? This is still one of the best teams out there. These teams are still one of the favourites to take the whole thing, to give Rafa ring number 3 and to give Cherio that World Championship title he's been fighting for so long. And now on to Sanguine in 3rd place, and it's here on the table that we enter this zone of teams between 3rd and roughly 6th, where, although their positions in the table may vary, any one of these teams can go and win the whole thing just like that. But let's focus on Sanguine, because what a year it has been for the boys. Vamos Sanguine, these guys are the nuts. They came into this league with so many people doubting them, saying they weren't good enough, they just had a lucky run at Worlds. Well, when they finished first at the end of Split 1, no one was saying anything about them. These guys are the real deal, and that first place finish was no fluke. They've come back in the second split and finished in 3rd, and that's including a big slump they had towards the end of the season, where they were dropping games left, right and centre. But they performed so well over the course of the year, they still managed to finish in 3rd. If I could use one word to describe this team, it would be synergy. These guys have played on the same team for years, and it shows because their team fights are potentially the cleanest in the entire league. There's a reason they're compared to Spacestation. The similarities are clear. It's all about these really clean, cohesive team fights. But it hasn't all been roses for the boys. They seem to have this one glaring weakness. They finished 1st in the regular split, 3rd in the second phase. Seems pretty good, but when it came to the playoffs, just wasn't the same Sanguine we expected. In the playoffs, they played against 6th seed Renegades and lost. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not as if they played badly, it was just that Renegades went absolutely mental that game. If you haven't watched it, I implore you, go watch it. Those sets were insane. But the fact remains that both times they've gotten to a tournament, they've lost in their first round. And this isn't something typical of Sanguine. This was a team known up until now as a team who are great at LAN. I mean, this is the team that beat teams like Armada and Simplicity to qualify for Worlds. This was a team that loved the tournaments. So to see them suddenly slipping now, somewhat concerning if you're a Sanguine fan. So the players to watch on this team, I would say, are Shinto and Panatom. The mid lane this year is probably the most stacked role in history, potentially. The play there is ridiculous, but Shinto has shown time and time again that he belongs right up there with the best of them. He's this team's primary carry, and for good reason. I mean, the amount of kills that flow through that mid lane, insanity. His signature picks, I would say, are his Hebo, and specifically his Merlin, Shinto Merlin. You just don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. He's got a really wide god pool, and, you know, if you're looking to shut down Sanguine, I think it all has to start with Shinto, frankly. The other player to watch in this team, like I said, is Panatom, and I feel like he is the barometer of this team's success. If he is having an impact, the team are winning. If he's not having an impact, the team just aren't there. On his good games, he looks like one of the best in the league, but he can be known to go missing occasionally. Sanguine are going to need a massive performance from him if they want to take the whole thing. And with that being said, Sanguine taking the world title here would be one of the most ridiculous stories I've ever seen in any game, frankly. This is a team that just no one was giving any respect to on the first day of the season. No one thought they were any good. The voting, don't forget they're voting for week 1. I'm looking at all of you who voted for Obey. Sanguine versus Obey, week 1, 90% voted for Obey. 90 for Obey. Obey are now 8th. Sanguine finished 1st that split. Shame on you. These guys have been grinding for years to get to this point. They've worked harder than just about any other team in this league just to get to this point, to get the respect they deserve. And if they could go on now to win the whole thing, vamos Sanguine, come on! In 4th place is Radiance, and well, just fucking look at that team. Look at that lineup. That is not fair. That should not be allowed. This is a team with 5 World Championship rings between them, and the only player who doesn't have a ring is potentially the best player of all. This team is ridiculous. On paper, anyway. They started the season really well. They were the only team to go unbeaten for the first few weeks. So, what are they doing down here in 4th, you might be asking? Well, it's been a bit of a strange year, all things told. Super teams in Smite have had a really bad run of it. Historically, they've just been a bit naff. I mean, look at PK last year. They collapsed towards the end of the season. Luminosity back in Season 2. Saw back in Seasons 3 and 4. I mean, no super team has ever quite reached their potential. And truth be told, Radiance are no different. Like I said, they came out of the blocks swinging. They looked like the best team in the league in the first few weeks, but they've hit some stumbling blocks here and there. The growing pains on this team have been very apparent. They've shown once again that you can't just put 5 talented players on a roster and expect it to work. Compromises have to be made. There's a reason why all these players look good. It's because they all want to carry. But you can't have 5 carries in a team. So this team has had to adapt and evolve and really change how it looks to be the team they are today. I don't think there's another team in the league that has a higher variance in terms of which team can show up and which team does often show up, other than maybe someone like Renegades. Sometimes you have a team turn up and they look like they look on paper. Unbeatable, with just carries coming out of every single role, kills everywhere, unstoppable. And then sometimes they look like they can lose to the lowest of the low in the league. They just have these games where nothing seems to be working. In their second phase, for example, it felt like they were really getting a grip on their playstyle, and then after missing a few weeks of play due to a member of their team getting ill, the slump was real. I don't know if I can even call it a slump. It was more of a fucking plummet, free-falling. They were dropping games left, right and centre, and they didn't really look like they were even in a lot of them. They had to fight their way back into the league, picking up sets here and there ahead of playoffs, so as you can imagine, their playoffs weren't amazing. Oh wait, no, scratch that, they came second. This is this team's superpower. For some reason, when it comes to tournaments, all form is written off and they suddenly become the team that they look like on paper. Playing in tournaments, they look like a different proposition entirely, which is a very good skill to have when you're trying to win a world tournament. Both years they've come into their playoffs looking like, a bit of a dodgy team, good moments, but not good enough to win the whole thing. And both times they've surprised everyone and made it to the final. Admittedly, both times they've lost to Ghost, but trust me, with the way the league has gone this season, being the closest team to Ghost is a real badge of honour. These guys love the big gameplay, and that's a really, really good sign for them coming into Worlds. I think what's been really interesting to watch with this team is how the style of play has changed. Like I said, this is a team where all 5 players want to carry, so how have they adapted? Well, as the name suggests, adapting has been the one to really bend the most, I think. They had a lot of success in the most recent playoffs with adapting's new playstyle, where he seems to play these setup-orientated junglers, often playing with lots of cooldown, tankiness, just setting up the carries behind him to do their thing. We saw his Circuit suddenly go from an unplayed god to a first ban against him within the space of a tournament, so it'll be interesting to see how they adapt that going forwards. But that's what's so scary about this team, is they can flip like a switch and suddenly decide, no, okay, Cyclone's going to carry, no Big Man Tings is going to carry, no Benji is going to carry. So it'll be interesting to see at Worlds what style of play they opt for. In terms of players to watch, it seems weird just picking one because, just look at that team. But I think their most consistent performer by a mile has been the solo lane terror himself, Benji. This guy has been destroying solo since Season 2, Salt Machine, Enemy, Run at Worlds. This guy is a beast and he continues to carry game in, game out from the solo lane. The current meta for solo laners has made him look even better as well, where they're building a lot of damage and his ability to kill squishies is just like no other. There's a reason why Sun Wukong's been banned against this team so much. He makes it look like the best god in the game somehow. I don't know how he does it. He can and absolutely will carry from the solo lane. You cannot leave this man unchecked. He is just too good. And the other player to watch, I'd say, would be Cyclone Spin. Cyclone is just Cyclone. Still ridiculously mechanically good, still an absolute carrying beast, and will still just build crit on anyone and everything, no matter who he's against. Just slams that crit, give me that rage, give me that wind demon. Just the man truly does not care. He will build crit on anything and he will kill you. We saw him at playoffs this year just be a beast as usual, and frankly a bit too much for teams like Spacestation to handle. It seems remiss to not mention Big Man Tings as well, because he has had an unbelievable season. Like I said earlier, mid-roll is insanely stacked, but Big Man Tings is right up there. Brilliant, brilliant player, massive god pool, and really instrumental to any success that Radiance have had. For all of the sort of woes I've said about their season, their slumps, their ability to lose easy games and all of this stuff, you cannot write this team off. Teams have done that at both tournaments, both the MSI and the playoffs, to their own peril. This is a team who can win the whole thing. Make no doubts about it, these guys are here to play. So before we talk about PK, let's instead have a short Smite history lesson on the run of SK Gaming winning Worlds last season. This was a team consisting of Zatman, Paul, Neilmar, and Scary D, who had flashes of greatness, but were plagued by inconsistency and finished at the low end of the table. They went to placements, qualify, and then went on to beat every single one of the favourites to win the tournament, one after the other, in the most ridiculous run Smite has ever seen. So that's enough about SK. Let's talk about PK. This is a team consisting of Neil, Paul, Scary D, and Zatman, who have had flashes of brilliance this season, but have been plagued by inconsistency. You get where I'm going with this. This is a carbon copy of the same SK team that won Worlds last season. I don't think there's another team in the league who care less about their finishing position. They could finish rock bottom and still have complete confidence in themselves that they can win. Why? Because their top end play is unbelievable. Probably the best team play in the entire league when they get going. So why aren't they top? Because that's their top end play. Their mid end play just seems to fall apart. When they're not all playing cohesively, they just have a habit of falling apart. Their top end play is incredible. We saw them 2-0 Ghost recently and make it look so easy. And then they lost to Eunited, second bottom in the table. This is what I mean. The inconsistency is the most consistent thing about them. Last year, they pulled it all together in time for Worlds, but the question is, can lightning strike twice? Playoffs were not a good sign for them. Their drafts were weird, their playstyle seemed awkward, they just did not seem like the same PK we'd seen all season, so it's slightly worrying for the boys that their drafts are a bit all over the place at this stage of play. But again, this is still a team you cannot write off. Players to watch should start with Paul. When you're talking about the best mechanical players in the league, you cannot leave out Paul. Paul is a monster. He is a mage extraordinaire, plays hunters, has made set middle suddenly look like a really strong pick. Paul is a beast, even if he does sit like a toddler at his desk when he plays.
Seconds, free cast and Titan. You have 30 seconds.
Holy hell, bro.
I think of all the players in the league, he has the scariest signature picks. Hebo, Hell, Paul Sephany, all of them seem like you have to ban them, but you cannot be wasting 3 bans on Paul. The man has too many gods. Don't bother doing it. Just accept your fate and just hit the F6, I think. But probably his biggest weakness as a player is playing from behind. He's a man who likes winning and being ahead. He's not like the Captain Twigs of this world who are willing to die for the cause. He wants to carry. Can he do that when the team is behind? The other player to watch is going to be Papa Zatman himself. Somehow playing the best Smite of his entire career 7 years in. He just keeps getting better and better. But this has been noticed in teams and he regularly gets shut down by the enemy junglers. I mean, if you've watched the Zatman stream, you'll know that the level 2 gank is very, very real. So can he find the room to do his thing? Only time will tell. Will they be the first team to go back-to-back since Epsilon? Guess we'll just have to find out. So I said earlier when talking about Sanguine that we're getting to a group of teams where any of them can come out of nowhere and win the whole thing, and I originally wasn't going to include Renegades in that group because if you look at their position in the table, they are very firmly at the bottom end. But then after their run at playoffs, it seems impossible to ignore them. This team went insane, and to see that they have that ability to go absolutely nuclear shows that this is, again, not a team you can write off for Worlds at all. They played better than, I would say, Sanguine, PK, maybe even Radiance, SSG. They played better than all of these guys. Although they did lose to Ghost, they put up the best fight, even better than Radiance in the grand finals. So, yeah, these guys are here to play. These guys are serious. So if they have such good play, why are they down here in the table? Well, it's because it's been a hell of a year for the Cowboys. Up and down, up and down. This is a team who always seem to be just about there to pull it together, but never can quite get any consistency to their game. I think if I had to describe this team in a few words, it would be ragtag, underdog, scrappy, plucky. These guys are the underdogs. The team seems like a somewhat random selection of players, and a lot of people thought they were taking a massive risk when they took on rank troll extraordinaire Awesome Jake 408 into the support role. It was a gamble, and if you looked at their position in the table, you'd think it hadn't paid off. So before we get to the good, let's discuss the bad of this team. Firstly, their biggest issue is their reliance on Lasbra to have a good game. When Lasbra is having one of his win the game by myself games, this team look unstoppable. They look capable of beating anyone. But when he's not having those games, they look like crap. They just crumble and, yeah, game's over in 20 minutes. In a league this competitive, you cannot have a single point of failure like that. It just can't happen. Because if Lasbra's shut down, game's shut down, team's shut down, it's not good enough. The second issue in their play was their inability to play late games. It seemed that in every game they'd have a close early game, they'd be challenging, looking like they're going to win, and it gets to 25 minutes, and then they'd lose horrendously in one team fight, and then the game would be over. Which game are you talking about, you're asking? all of them, every game, and it was so frustrating to watch. And the unfortunate truth is for Renegades that the end of the game is the most important bit. As the death timers get longer, as the items get stronger, you just cannot afford to be losing your whole team at Gold Fury, which is a Renegades classic. You can have all the early contention you want, but if you can't handle the late game, then you're not going to win Worlds. It's that simple. So with that being said, why do I still think they can win the whole tournament? Well, because their level of improvement has been insane this year. They are the ultimate wildcard team. No one knows which version of Renegades is going to turn up on any given day. Not even Renegades, especially not Renegades. What I hadn't appreciated throughout the rest of the league is how good their top end of play is, but we saw that at playoffs. We saw them against Sanguine, pulling out probably the best Smite I've ever seen from them. Their games against Sanguine were brutal, scrappy, but they did everything they could to win, and that's what counts. That's what you need to see from a team trying to win Worlds. They sit firmly in this category of teams like PK, like SK before them, like Radiance, where if they get their shit together, their level of improvement shows that they are good enough to win the whole thing. Players to watch, you can only start with one man, the 408 himself. What a game this guy had at playoffs. What a run he had. What a gamble Awesome Jake has turned out to be. From rank troll to one of the best supports in the league. He has grown so much as a player. He still brings the weird Jake jank, but he does it in a really constructive way now, where he brings a new edge to this team. I mean, he makes Amir and Tyr like the best gods in the game, and I don't know how. I don't understand. He's the sort of player who can go 0-15 and still be MVP. That's just his style, and it gives Renegades that weirdness they need to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. He's probably the most unknown quantity in the entire league, and that's what you need to really catch teams off by guard. The other player to watch is undoubtedly Lasbra, because like I said, this team are very reliant on him to do well. Jake's improvement has meant that their reliance on Lasbra has gotten so much better than it used to be. They now don't need him to be their only win condition, but he's still a really fundamental part of this team. He loves to play Set, Humbat, Pele, those are the Ratatoska, those are the gods you're likely to see on him, and his reliance on those is potentially a little bit worrying, as you know, when you're in the other team, you know who you're looking to shut down. But he's still a massive part of the success for this team, so a really key player moving forwards. This team are mercurial, they are unreliable, inconsistent, but they are game changers and capable of maybe pulling out some ridiculous games, taking the whole thing. Maybe, who can say? Eunited now, and if you look at this roster of players, you cannot quite believe that they finished in 7th, but this has been a weird season for Eunited. First game, they beat Ghost, everything is looking peachy. At the end of the year, the roster is unrecognisable from the start. People have come on, move off, move positions, Snoopy's been all over the place. It's been a bit of a mess, frankly. Their eternal quest to find a support seems to have settled on Gino, but Gino hasn't quite settled in how they'd like him to. They brought in Baskin in the solo lane, which should have been, GG, league is over, the king is here, but even Baskin seems to be having a bit of a tough time. They've been having weird picks like Cerberus solo they seem to love and all of this kind of stuff. So what's going wrong for the boys? Well, the truth is I still feel like Gino really isn't meshing in support quite for them. Horrorwind is still playing well, I think. Snoopy I think is playing well, but the rest of the team just don't seem to be quite reaching their full potential, and I feel like they need someone in the support role to really just get in there. And I'm not criticising Gino here, I just don't think his playstyle really matches with them. I don't know why, I couldn't tell you why, I couldn't tell you what they need to do to improve. Something just seems to be not clicking for the boys. That being said, towards the end of the season they had some really encouraging performances, and they seem to be improving week on week, but they didn't even qualify for the playoffs this year, which is, difficult. In terms of qualifying for Worlds, it's going to be a real struggle, but I mean, look at the quality of player on this team. This is not a team that should be as low as this. If they get their shit together in the next few weeks, then they could really scare some teams, I think. I mean, they beat PK fairly well at the end of the season in really close games, but they looked their best, so maybe this is the rise of the EU boys? Who knows? A lot of times it seemed like they were just getting it together and like it was all coming into the picture, but it never quite has. So will they be able to do it ahead of Worlds? Who knows? Player to watch will start with Horrorwind, because Horrorwind is still a fantastic player and his Janus is still probably the best in the league. But can they make the most of him? Can they make him the carry that we know he can be? Outside of Janus, he hasn't had the greatest season. I think he's still a class player, but I think the team comp really needs to adapt to make sure that he is front and centre doing the damage. The other player to me to watch is going to be Scream, their jungler. Scream, it was in my opinion ahead of this season one of the best North American junglers we've ever seen, but he's not had a good season. His picks have been strange. He loves his Poseidon jungle, his Fenrir. I don't hate them, but they're just a bit strange and they don't really seem to work with the rest of the team. His skill cap is up in the stratosphere, but we just haven't seen that from him. So if he can bring that out in time for Worlds, then he can be challenging just like he did on the Splice team, just like he did in the Eunited team that he won Worlds with. Again, definitely one of the weaker teams in the league, but, you know, with that quality of player, who knows what they could do. Finally, we come to Obey. Oh, the Obey boys. It's been a long year. It's been a long year. Oh, I don't really know what to say about these guys. They have improved so much. They have learned, they've adapted, they've changed playstyle, they've changed junglers, they've changed everything. But they still kind of suck. Oh no, they are bottom of the league for a reason. So many times, week on week, it's just seemed like this is going to be their week that they pull it all together. They would have these games where they look really good, like they almost win, and it's like, yes, here we go. These are the sort of games we're expecting from a team like this. This is what we think they can do. And then next week they come out and just suck all over again, and it feels like we're back to square one. Their playstyle in recent weeks has been interesting to say the least. They're trying new stuff, which is always good. They're trying a very objective-based team style where everyone's building executioners, stone-cutting swords, and they're picking gods who are good at applying those. So, you know, no one's got any armor. They're good at shredding objectives. It's interesting stuff. And maybe on another team it would work. But the unfortunate thing for Obey is you can't tell whether it's a good strategy not working or whether they just kind of, you know, aren't very good. I'm being facetious here, but these guys have had a rough year and have sat very firmly at the bottom of the table at all points. If these guys went and qualified for Worlds, I'd be impressed. If they went and won it, I don't know what I'd do. I'd say to eat a shoe, but I've seen too many people have that come true to say something like that. But if they win it, that would be, I don't even know what to say, the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in a video game. The players to watch for Obey, well, we'll start with Inbound, who has been probably the most criticised player this season. Some fairly, some unfairly, but one thing I will say about him is that he has improved leaps and bounds from when he started. I think the beginning of the league can be summed up in that clip where he got trapped in the corner by Neil, Mar and Zapman, and Neil just slowly says, "Welcome to the league, buddy."
Goodbye, Bobby. Welcome to the league, man.
That's kind of his year for the first half of things, but he looks like a new player now. His Ymir picks don't look as horrible as they used to. His Yamoja is now good all of a sudden. He made an Odin support pick the other day look really strong. He is a brand new guy, and if Obey are to do well, he needs to be playing well at the heart of everything they do. He has a real want to learn, a want to improve. He wants to grind the game and try hard, so I really hope they can pull it together. Only time will tell. The other player to watch is Sino, Season 5 World MVP. This guy can be amazing. He can also play a Cyrus jungle every game and make me want to bash my head into the wall. I don't really know what goes on in the head of Sino. I know he's good enough to be one of the best, but he just seems to want to play this weird style. He can be amazing, and this team started winning the only games they'd won all season when he joined. There's a reason for that. He is really good. He just needs to get his picks together. I don't even mind things like Arachne. I know Arachne seems like a weird pick, but it's a bit scary if she gets ahead. It can do all sorts of weird stuff. It throws a spanner in the works. The Osiris, on the other hand, let it go. Bin it. Get it out of here. I don't want to see it anymore. If he plays well, this team can do something. If him and Inbound go back to the lowest lows, this team are going nowhere. And now the final teams that can qualify were the SML teams that won the most recent wildcard tournament. You have Mind the Gap in North America and Belt Slap in EU. And let's start with Mind the Gap, who are not the team I expected to come through, to be honest. Admittedly, I'll have to confess here, I haven't paid that much attention to the North American SML scene, but I do know that this team looked really good, and they beat a very strong team in Spreen, whatever they're called, to get to this point. Layers went absolutely ape shit in qualifying, just went nuts. Layers is a very, very strong player. He's showed it at tournaments before. He is capable of having these sort of tournament runs that send some waves. So I'm excited to see what the boys can do. Belt Slap, on the other hand, I felt obliged to make this meme because Belt Slap is so good. This looks a lot like the Dignitas team of old, and so you'd think those are the players I'd be talking about. But it's the new additions who have really made the waves. I've been saying for years that Julio is probably the best solo laner playing in Europe, and he's showing it every week, but the real sensation has been Johnny. Oh my god, this guy is nuts. Everyone knew he was mechanically nuts for a while, but he was on a lot of kind of dodgy teams here and there, could never quite make full use of it. Now he's getting pentakills like every week. He is ridiculous. This team just let him do his thing. It reminds me of old adapting. Just, send him on his way and he'll carry the game for us. The games to qualify for these wildcards were not easy at all. They were a lot closer fought than I expected, which is on one hand a very big compliment to the teams they played, but on another hand somewhat concerning because a team like this, if you think they're going to win the whole thing, they need to be crushing the SML. But I think these guys really have the potential to go far. This core of players haven't done particularly well at tournaments over the years, but that does not mean you should be writing them off because these guys are nuts. This team have gone undefeated in the SML for a reason. They are the best team there. They are, frankly, SPL caliber. Frankly, they're better than a lot of SPL teams, so these guys can go really far, especially if Johnny shows the sort of form that he's been showing all year long. I would love to see an SML team go and take the whole thing, and if anyone's going to do it, I really think it could be the boys. But there's a big elephant in the room with this team, and that is now that instead of being played on LAN, the qualifiers for Worlds will be played online. How a team in Europe are going to play on North American servers, and especially when they're not able to get across to America, is yet to be seen, and I somehow feel there's going to be some major bullshit involved, but what can you do? We're going to have to wait and see, frankly. There it is, Worlds, in a nutshell, all summed up for your beautiful little faces. God knows what's going to happen in qualifiers. I think it seems fairly predictable now, but, stuff has a habit of going very awry very quickly in these sort of qualifiers, so let's be ready for it. The order of the table is fairly accurate, but there's a lot going on here under the surface, so God knows what's going to happen, but January 5th, that's when the qualifiers for Worlds start. January 8th, that's when Worlds itself starts. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be absolute chaos, and I am so ready for it. If there's anything I've missed, any questions you have, slap them down below. Rate, comment, subscribe, share, dig, bleh, that crap. I love you all. See you later. Goodbye.